Since 2001, U.S. soldiers, active Guard and Reserve, and coalition forces have helped to overthrow 2 hostile regimes, rescue 2 nations from oppression, and liberate over 50 million people. This is the story of nearly a decade of war, and of 4 soldiers who exemplify the finest attributes of today's soldier: selfless service, honor, loyalty, courage. America's Army, the strength of the nation.
It was pretty apparent that World Trade Center was going to work.
When our nation was attacked at home, ordinary young men and women found themselves thrown into extraordinary circumstances.
Because of the amazing sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, their devotion to their nation and to the services, and the Army, of course, and the support of their families, they've gone out and done what many thought was impossible.
It's the bond of trust among soldiers that binds us together, from the team and the squad to the headquarters of the Department of the Army. We have been put in this cauldron together. We have shouldered the burden side by side, and we are stronger because we trust and believe in each other.
First, the Army struck against the terrorist organization that orchestrated the 9/11 attacks and the regime that harbored its leaders in Afghanistan.
The enemy that is out there is very resilient, very tenacious. It is an enemy that is hidden among the people of the world. And it takes a special breed of soldier today to be able to go out there and not only bring peace and stability to those countries where they're deployed, but also to seek out and find those enemy forces, to destroy those enemy forces, and at the same time build relationships with the people where the enemy are hidden.
Years after the nation entered Afghanistan, the Army once again answered the nation's call with Operation Iraqi Freedom. Sergeant First Class Paul Smith was among the first wave of soldiers in the assault on Baghdad. Smith was engaged in the construction of a prisoner of war holding area when his task force was violently attacked by a company-sized enemy force. Realizing the vulnerability of over 100 fellow soldiers, Smith quickly organized a hasty defense. Fearing the enemy would overrun their defenses, Smith moved under withering fire to man a .50 caliber machine gun on a damaged armored personnel carrier. His courageous actions helped defeat the enemy attack while allowing the safe withdrawal of numerous wounded soldiers. During this action, he was mortally wounded. Smith was awarded the Medal of Honor for his valorous action.
This country could use a good hero to look up to. And I don't mean baseball players, I don't mean basketball players, and I don't mean football players. The man that put his life on the line, now that's a hero.
In 2003, the Army captured Saddam Hussein. Shortly thereafter, Afghanistan adopted a democratic constitution. And just 1 month after Afghanistan's election, Iraq approved a new constitution in a national vote.
The American soldier has had a huge impact on both Iraqis and Afghans. They've been allowed to vote. They've been allowed to have access to schools. Over time, a bettering of the living conditions in their respective countries.
But the Army's job was far from over. War in the 21st century required more of the Army at all levels than they had ever faced before. U.S. soldiers were helping to set conditions for stability in the Middle East and Southwest Asia. But their accomplishments came at a price. Fortunately, soldiers were up for the challenge. In fact, you could say some were born for it. Men like Specialist Ross McGinnis. While serving as an M2 .50 caliber machine gunner in combat operations against an enemy in Iraq, McGinnis covered a live grenade to absorb the majority of the explosion and allowed the remaining members of his crew to escape the attack with their lives. For his extraordinary heroism and selflessness, Specialist McGinnis was awarded the Medal of Honor.
I considered Ross my hero. He decided that his life was worth less than 4 other lives, basically. That was a very tough decision to make, but it was the right decision. And the right decision isn't always easy. Sometimes it requires honor.
The simultaneous conflict in Afghanistan was also placing heavy demands on the Army, including the ultimate sacrifice of some of our finest soldiers. Sergeant First Class Jared Monty had already served with distinction in combat, earning the Bronze Star when he returned for another tour in Afghanistan. While leading an intelligence-gathering mission in Afghanistan, Monty's 16-man patrol was attacked by as many as 50 enemy fighters. He twice attempted to move from behind the cover of rocks into the face of relentless enemy fire to rescue a fallen comrade. Monty made a third attempt to cross open terrain through intense enemy fire. On his final attempt, he was mortally wounded. For his immeasurable courage and uncommon valor in sacrificing his life to save his fellow soldier, Monty was awarded the Medal of Honor.
He had a lot of pride in doing his job and doing it well. He was a real soldier. He did what you're supposed to do. He followed the soldier's creed to the letter.
He said, I trained these men. Nobody else is going to take over what I did. I'm going to get them home safe. They're my responsibility. He would not allow them to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. He joined the military to help those who cannot help themselves.
We have completely transformed ourselves into an army that is more relevant to the challenges of the 21st century. And we've done that while we have been deploying 150,000 soldiers over and back to Iraq and Afghanistan every year.
American soldiers have achieved a great deal during nearly a decade of relentless effort. Our soldiers have trained and equipped enough Iraqi security forces to conduct Operation New Dawn, a responsible drawdown in Iraq, while continuing to focus on al-Qaeda and their supporters in Afghanistan.
This army has proven itself to be such an incredibly resilient force. How difficult it has been to take the challenges of 9 years of war, the challenges and the effects to families and children and to soldiers themselves, and yet be still as committed and as dedicated to the warfight as any time.
That commitment was exemplified by Staff Sergeant Robert Miller while serving in Afghanistan's treacherous Konar province. Miller was leading a nighttime patrol in the Gwardesh Valley, comprised of Green Berets and local Afghan National Army soldiers when insurgents attacked. Miller directed fire and simultaneously moved forward to buy time for his teammates to take cover. He drew fire from more than 100 enemy fighters, ultimately saving the lives of his teammates, American and Afghan. For his extraordinary valor, Staff Sergeant Miller was awarded the Medal of Honor.
When I heard that he had sacrificed his life for others, that did help us a lot in dealing with the grief, that we knew that his death was not in vain.
And if Rob had not been able to take control of that action and regain control of that, whether it was a few seconds or a couple minutes, it's very likely that a number of the other people in the team and the Afghanis would not have survived.
This is the story of what one American soldier did for his team, but it's also a story of what they did for him. 2 of his teammates braved the bullets and rushed to Rob's aid. In those final moments, they were there at his side. American soldiers there for each other.
That's the kind of ethos that we have across this Army. I will always place the mission first. I will never accept defeat. I will never quit, and I will never leave a fallen comrade. We should feel very proud as a country that we have yet another generation of Americans who believe so strongly in the values and ideals that this country stands for, that they're willing to put their lives on the line to secure them. So I think America can be very proud of the men and women of its armed forces.
The American soldiers stand as our nation's most visible and enduring symbol of commitment in an era of persistent conflict. They fight for their country. They are the strength of the nation.